episodes. Today we have Brittany Ward. Brittany, how you doing this morning?
Woo!
Oh,
Good.
oh, that's better than me. That's way better than me. Um,
I'm
um,
fully caffeinated.
oh, that's awesome. See, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I just have to kind of will myself into existence every morning. So,
Right. I feel
uh,
bad for you. Like, this is the most energy you're gonna have all day long.
yeah. Well, actually, for me, it's weird. I always have the most energy like right before I go to bed.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a slow burn, and then it's just like a flash, and then I'm out. um, but everyone who's listening today, Brittany Ward is someone who's kind of like a unicorn in terms of what I've heard. Because I've had so many recommendations, and I'm always like, "Who's Brittany? Who's Brittany?" I know we've spoken a couple times, but I've never actually met you in person, never had a full conversation with you, in
Yeah.
terms of like your story and everything like that. But the amount of people that talk highly about you, you just can't ignore. So I'm super grateful and honored that you're here
Oh,
on
I'm so
today's segment.
flattered.
And
This is
I just want to give you a chance and also give the opportunity, the listeners an opportunity to understand your story, your struggles, your sacrifices, your commitments, but also your biggest wins throughout your journey. So that being said, can you just kind of give us a quick little recap in terms of where you started and where you are today, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, totally. So, I studied communications and Spanish at UCF in
Oh.
Orlando and got into communications and took some advertising and marketing classes along the way, really with no idea of where I wanted to end up. I graduated at 20 years old,
Wow.
accidentally. Um, they said, just sign here and you're done. I'm like, no, wait, let me double major or pick something else.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was too late. So I ended up graduating with a communications degree, and I joke now that I ended up in this field because I just kept avoiding having to take calculus. So now I'm a marketer.
yeah. Absolutely.
I graduated and I got a really awesome referral for a company I worked with throughout college.
Hmm.
And back then, this was 2006, they were a spring break tour operator, and they're still in existence today.
Okay.
But people obviously were less likely to plan their own trips on the internet back then. So as a college kid, it was a great alternative. So I got a referral. I was working for them, and their marketing agency, as luck would have it,
Hmm.
had a opening in Orlando, and I started with them, and that was my first real introduction to working. Back in 2007 was a interactive marketing agency, what we now call digital,
Hmm.
but no one knew what the heck to call it.
Yeah.
And we were creating Facebook games, if you remember those,
Yeah.
and apps. And one of my first accounts that I ever closed and sold was for a Twitter campaign. This was 2007. Like, this
Wow.
was the wild, wild west back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Um, and I can tell you, one of the first meetings they actually brought me along in as sort of a subject matter expert was
Hmm.
Fox Sports Florida. And I was talking to their sportscasters. Here I was, 22 years old, like, this is how you run a social media campaign, you know? Um, so it was so much fun. I learned so much. And in typical agency life, after 2 years with my tongue out, I was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I over the next 10 years, I worked for a variety of different food and beverage brands. So
Mhm.
I started with Nature's Table. I was managing all their corporate communications and
Mhm.
actually selling restaurant franchises.
Mhm.
They were conveniently an account I had been pitching at the agency, and they said, we need an internal person. So
Mhm.
um, worked for them for a bit and then
I see
moved
a recurring
into,
thing here.
you're
Dang.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I was working for them, and then went to work for Buffalo Wild Wings for about 4 years.
Mhm.
Worked for Burger King Corporate down in Miami. Came back, moved back to Tampa. I was working for World of Beer. So a lot of travel, a lot of eating. Um,
Sounds like good
a
food though,
lot.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, some places more than others, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
definitely.
Mhm.
Um, and really, honestly, in 90% of those roles really acting as a consultant, because when you're the only person in front of them, I mean, they're going to ask you questions about every piece of their business. So it was a really awesome way for me to envision entrepreneurship before ever actually starting my own agency.
Hmm.
It'll be 2 years ago this coming January. So um, those roles definitely, I would say, prepared me in some ways,
Hmm.
but until you actually make the flip and, start your own business and feel those trials and tribulations for
Right.
yourself, I don't think anything can prepare you. So
Abs-
it's been a wild ride and a lot of fun, mostly. But yeah, that's kind
All
of
right.
my backstory.
Okay. All right. So let's kind of take it back. Because I see the recurring theme has always been like you find what started with the spring break, and then they had a connection with the marketing agency, and then you work with them, and then the marketing agency had a connection with, so and so. And so you kind of, transition in between those spots. Now, can you recall like what was your drive going from place to place? Was it because you wanted more education, more knowledge? Was it because you just weren't happy there? Like what was pushing you and driving you to pursue, higher pursuits?
Each situation certainly was unique in its own way, but I think at the end of the day, for me, it was always about growth.
Mm-hmm.
So growth in education, growth in responsibilities, growth in money,
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
ways to advance myself when I felt like either I was capped in the role where I was, or, they weren't promoting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it you just kind of hit a wall, unfortunately. And when the opportunity presented itself,
Mm-hmm.
in the circumstances, I certainly thought this is a way for me to grow both personally and as a professional. So I think that was probably the final decision maker, is I get to advance, kind of all of those things.
Gotcha. And so when we're talking about growth and advancing ourselves, what ultimately does that mean for you? Like, you know, getting the better position, getting the bigger paycheck, all that kind of stuff. What does that ultimately mean for you and translate in your mind into?
I mean, I guess I've always been, the person at the front of the classroom with their hand raised. So constant curiosity, know why and know more. And, how do I, contribute and see my own contributions in that sort of, fulfillment,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just kind of an innate curiosity that I carry,
Mhm.
which only just further propels the need to like take that next step.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So what was the last position you had before you decided to like make the jump into entrepreneurialism?
I was a director of marketing for World of Beer.
So World of Beer, right? Okay. So how long were you at World of Beer before you were like, you know what? I kind of want to start a business, but I'm not sure if I want to do this yet.
2 days. No, just kidding. I was with him almost 2 years.
Mhm.
And, the role in particular with that organization started as one thing and then became kind of something different. I was traveling
Mhm.
3 weeks out of the month, 3 to 4 days out of the week.
Wow.
Uh, the trajectory of the company had kind of stalled, and as history would tell you, that's kind of when I start getting antsy. Um, and having, sort of going back for a second, having lived in Tampa, working for Buffalo Wild Wings, and then moving to Miami for a couple years,
Mhm.
when I came back to Tampa, of course, you reconnect with people. And
Right.
I had a few folks reach out and say, can you help with XYZ, sort of before I had started this role. And I agreed. And so, that little seed was planted, like, oh, maybe
Mm,
this could be something.
there you go.
And then, of course, at 2 years down the road, and I'm starting to get a little antsy again, and I'm thinking, I think this could be a thing. So I reconnected with a few people and um, started my, side hustle just
Mhm,
to
mhm.
kind of dip my toe back in the water,
Yeah.
and went for it.
So you were actively like still working for Buffalo Wild Wings while you were trying to start your own thing.
A World of Beer.
World of Beer, sorry, World of Beer.
That's okay.
Yeah, before you actually committed 100%, you were kind of working at the 9 to 5, per se, but also still building your business on the side or your side hustle.
Right.
Okay. And did you find any struggles with that in terms of like time, commitment, your mental health?
I mean, no. Um,
Okay.
I mean, I think this is just a fallacy of like
Mm,
work-life balance. I feel like you just should just do what fills your cup.
yeah.
And what did that for me was I could manage and run and do the necessary things that I had a responsibility to do. And my boss knew, I had
Hmm.
these kind of things on the side, none of which was competitive necessarily.
Hmm.
Um, and so I thrive and I enjoy what I do. So it never felt like, oh, gotta go to the office after the office,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just felt like some really cool projects that I got to work on outside of doing, my sort of corporate job.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I would be lying if I said I didn't have to make, your own personal sacrifices and,
Hmm.
skip parties and work on Sundays when I probably just wanted to watch Netflix. But,
Yeah.
when there's a goal in mind and you enjoy doing it,
Hmm.
I feel like, it doesn't feel as daunting. It
Hmm.
feels like, it fills you up.
Gotcha. All right. All right. So were there
Yeah.
anything, kind of like on the other side of the fence, right? So, before you made that complete commitment, you had this impression of what starting your business was like, and then you make the decision, and then you were like, oh wow, there's all these other little hidden things behind here. Did you experience that same kind of trajectory that most entrepreneurs face, or were you kind of like, oh no, I'm ready for this?
No, I don't think you're ever really ready. I think you just have to like make the decision,
Hmm.
burn the ships,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then go for it.
Yeah.
I know, funny story, once this sort of seed was planted and I had
Hmm.
been thinking about it, and I swear for at least 6 months, like my main objective to myself was I'm not going to have health insurance. Like that alone
Yeah.
stopped me for a solid 6 months. I have no idea why, because just it's the mental sort of on and off switch to like all the hurdles will be hurdles.
Hmm.
But there's also solutions to those too, and you figure it out along the way. I actually was just having a conversation with someone recently, and she's doing a lot of freelancing, in fact doing a little bit of work for me. And I said, what's your end goal? Like, do you want to have an agency? Do you
Hmm.
want to just be flexible and freelance in different areas? And she said, no, I think I want to have like an agency and do my thing. And I said, well, what are you doing? Like, go do that. Like, don't go and work for other people. She said, well, I think I need a little more experience and da da da. And I'm thinking like, no,
No.
don't waste any more time.
Yeah,
Just go. Yeah.
it's how often do you encounter people that are still stuck in like, oh, but what about this? But what about that? Because it seems like when I meet individuals that want to start their own business, it comes down to like, okay, well, how do I do it without any money, right? How do I do it, without the benefits like the 401k, the health, and that kind of stuff? And then like,
Yep.
how do I do it if I don't have the time, right? Because
Right.
it's so I feel like those are the big three common challenges that I hear from people.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm kind of like, you figure it out as you go. So I'm not
Exactly.
sure if you have that same take, or if you have any kind of, key insights that you could share outside of just mine. Just do it.
I mean, certainly we'd make it sound simple, like, oh, just do it. But
Yeah.
there is a sort of where that meets reality too.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in my circumstance, by the way, I'm a totally healthy human. I don't know why, like in the back of my mind, I'm like, I need health insurance. Um, of course, for like the one crazy day you get sick, you need it. But anyway, you have to do your due diligence.
Hmm.
So I'm not just saying just jump into the deep end of the pool when you don't know how to swim.
Yeah.
Ask questions, align yourself with people that you have resources, mentors, um, I Google everything as an
Hmm.
adult. I
Hmm.
don't know
Hmm.
something that, Google is your friend.
Absolutely.
Someone somewhere has written a blog about it. So, find resources. Don't be afraid. I think this is the nugget here. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to ask. And, pretending that you know everything is to no one's advantage. In fact, I can say probably one of the things that I've had to work on most is being able just to own that vulnerability of saying,
Mhm.
I don't know how to do this. Like, I need
Mhm.
someone to help me. Someone out there has to be an expert.
Yeah.
It's not me. I'm going to go find that person. But I think that takes a lot of courage to be able to own, like, I don't have the answer for everything, but
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, someone has to, and where can I find that person? Who can help me?
I love it. So you said two important things. Like, well, number one was like asking for help. So just, hey, there's people out there that actively want to help you. You just
Hmm.
got to ask for help.
Yes.
But number two is vulnerability. So with those two things, what pops into my mind is ego. Now, when it comes to ego, did you ever feel like your ego was getting in the way at any certain points? Or was it kind of like you're running and you're gunning and you're trying to figure this out as you go?
I wish that I had more of that. Because I think that there is a certain degree of, like, where ego meets self-confidence. And they say, there's some crazy statistic about failures of businesses and how entrepreneurs sometimes have a screw loose because they believe in themselves more than anyone else
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And so I think that you definitely need that.
Hmm.
And as a tactical and strategic marketer,
Hmm.
I feel like I can outmarket anyone. But when it comes to being a business owner, there are pieces to that you have to be vulnerable about, because there's things that I've just never done. Like, I didn't know how to work QuickBooks, or how to, you know, send invoices and,
Yeah.
file my taxes. Like, what? I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
um, and I think dropping that ego
Mhm.
definitely has to be part of your journey if you
Mhm.
expect, to advance your business and yourself. um I think there's the old adage, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And
Absolutely.
be honest, I think for me, on the opposite spectrum is having to draw a line of, at some point I have to charge for my business and help and say
Mhm.
no.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's really been my personal struggle. But yes, I think, the marriage of those two things, of vulnerability and ego,
Mhm.
you have to align, certainly.
Got it. Okay. So you said something that stood out to me, which was you pretty much drawing the line in the sand, right? So when it comes to drawing the line in the sand, where do you figure out how to do that? How do you determine this is the point where I draw that line and I'm with it here and I'm totally against it over here? How did you determine that for yourself?
I This is the season of my business right now,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I don't know that I have a clear answer for you. I'm
Sure.
figuring that out. What I do
Mhm.
know is that a girl's got to eat, and I think I've been too generous.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's just in me to always want to help and say, yes, of course I can help you do that.
Mhm.
I sent a funny tweet yesterday. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen it, and has been, favorited or retweeted a couple times now. And
Mhm.
um, I had a new client meeting yesterday, pitch, and one of them had asked, are you always available? Like, referencing my schedule and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
being able to accommodate them. And like, me a year ago would have been like, yeah, of course, whenever you need. When can I
Yep.
be there? Right now? You need me right now? Here I
Yeah,
am.
yeah, yeah.
And today I was able just to say, no, I'm not always available. I have. That took a lot, believe me. And
Yeah,
my insides were like,
yeah.
no, what are
Oh,
they
no.
gonna
It's a
say?
huge it's a huge milestone. So congratulations to you because
Yeah,
that's a big
thank
turning point in terms of your mindset and how you
you. It is
approach things going forward. So,
1,000%.
anyways, but continue.
And
Sorry to
here's
cut
the
you off.
crazy part. I was so surprised, I have to tell you, is that as this is coming out of my mouth, and I'm also trying to believe myself so I can
Mhm.
keep a straight face,
Yeah.
the other person responded and they said, good for you. Yeah. Good. Wow. Good
Good.
job. you know?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think people understand, like, you have to have boundaries, but, you know, having the courage to believe in yourself and know your value and your worth,
Hmm.
that takes a long time and practice. At least it did for me. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so it's no is such an interesting concept with no, because I found that the moment I started saying no, I actually started getting more referrals for my business, and also I was able to charge a higher fee. And in a
yes,
previous episode of Burning the Boats, I was speaking with Michael Higgins, and he mentioned how his first client was she owns Mr. Empanada, and she's like, how much is it for a website? And he was at $3,000, and he just wrote the check. She wrote the check right off the bat. And so we were like, there's probably more opportunity there to wiggle room, but that kind of determines like your pricing, how you want to price yourself. But
yeah,
after that, saying no led to more opportunities,
right,
you know? And it sounds like that person that was kind of cheering you on because they understood that, oh, this is somebody who's actually understands what's going on now,
exactly.
you know? Perfect. Okay. Okay. So now in terms of, we're, so where are you currently with your business now today?
Well, I have, after starting full service and
Mhm.
offering everything to everyone and saying
Uh-huh.
yes to
Uh-huh.
everything,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
strategically, I knew like I didn't want to do that forever. I thought, let me start and really open and cast a wide net to figure out what I love, and then really start to pare down and find a niche
Mhm.
for me and for my business, and profitability wise as well.
Mhm.
So I really moved more into the social media influencer space. In fact, this week we just pushed Create Collabs .com live, and that was a way for me to productize a service-based business.
Mhm.
So I wasn't capped just straight up billing hours all the
Mhm.
time. And it was a way for me to be able to scale without having to go get a huge office and hire more people and become an HR manager and not a marketer. Um, so I'm really excited about that. I you know, before we started, I had told you, on one hand, I'm really excited. On the other hand, I'm really terrified. Whether it does work or doesn't work, I think it will be valuable regardless.
Mhm.
It will certainly be a learning experience in a way, just to continue finding that niche and what white space I can own. Yeah,
Well, I mean, congratulations, because that takes it's a lot. You're risking a lot because you're putting yourself out there, right? And I think that's one thing that stops a lot of people is like that judgment factor of, when I just
hmm,
started this and I have no idea if it's going to succeed, but I feel like this is the right way I should be going.
yeah.
And so just slow
Thank
clap for being able to launch that and getting it going, because it does take a lot.
you.
And I wish you the best of success when it comes to that. But before we start talking more about Create Collabs, I know before you said something that stood out to me, that was you made a strategic decision to go in this direction.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit more about what that strategic decision was, and on kind of how did you have like a light bulb moment where you're like, oh, you know what, this is kind of where I want to go, and this is why?
I don't know that it was like an aha moment or like a
Hmm.
light bulb moment. It was really things that continued to happen over time that led me to a place. So, you know, after saying we're going to be full service, we're going to offer everything, and then all of a sudden someone wants to launch a SEO campaign in their mortgage business, and I'm like falling asleep in the middle of the meeting. I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, and by being able to um, eliminate things,
Hmm.
I think was probably my path, rather than like clinging to the things that were yeses. I was kind of checking things off, like, okay, that's probably not it.
Yeah.
um, and then really doing some self-evaluation about where can I actually make money doing this, because
Mhm.
if I'm working with um, a developer and they're billing 80% of the project and I've got whatever scraps are left over,
Yeah.
well, that's probably not a great model either, unless I want to go, to a point where I can hire someone full time. And as I stated,
Hmm.
don't want to hire, really focused on how can I make the most out of, I don't want to call it solopreneur, but a
Right.
network of really awesome people that I can align and tap when I need.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it was a combination of all of those things. And then, as trends in marketing also started changing, it sort of opened this door. And we were doing a lot of these collaborations and influencer collaborations for client campaigns after Facebook's algorithms changed and they were getting no organic reach anymore.
Yeah.
And then I'm realizing, okay, well, there's also a need for content and advertising. How do we marry these two? And so as we're doing these campaigns and I started seeing the impact and they were really becoming more and more popular and prevalent and necessary for small and local businesses, it just sort of became like this natural fit that took a life on of its own.
Mm.
Um, I had someone I was meeting with, and she said, "Well, why don't you just make a website and like let them pick themselves?" And I'm like, "That would never."
So
Wait
like
a
so like an
minute.
a la carte.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I chewed on it for a little while, and I kept doing what I was doing,
Hmm.
and in my own mind, sort of validating why this wouldn't work. And I ran out of reasons that it wouldn't work. So I went for it.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. All right. And so, um, what stood out there is that you were saying that you were eliminating things that you didn't necessarily want to do, or
Yeah.
areas that you didn't want to provide value in. Um, can you share more about that elimination process? Because I think that's really key in terms of determining, you know, how to move forward, right? Because I think many of us, whenever we have a great idea and we want to implement it, the first thing that happens is we start thinking about all the reasons why it won't work. you know, and then once we're like, we kind of come to a point where we determine whether or not that's a big enough problem.
Right.
Um, and we either decide to act on it or not. So it sounds like you went through an exhausting elimination period yourself. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of how we sort of niched and how we got there in that elimination period, in my own experience in my own career, where do I provide the most value?
Mhm.
And as much as I could listen and diagnose a client's needs and put a strategic plan together,
Mhm.
I didn't want to be involved in a lot of the minutia of executing that, which is where there are lots of really talented people that enjoy that.
Mhm.
I started aligning myself. And so that was a solution. But at the end of the day, for me, I felt like I'm providing um, nothing more than just an introduction.
Mm.
I'm managing it and I don't really want to be. I'm also not really making a lot of money off of it. And it's taking me, more importantly, it's taking me away from things that I really like doing.
Mhm.
Um, and then when it came to, ultimately deciding like, I want to build this custom software and launch this platform for Create Collabs.
Yeah.
And, kind of going through that checklist and eliminating reasons why it won't work. There were things I did along the way, some due diligence. I joined some other platforms. I went through demos of other companies that were doing like something similar.
Mhm.
I had a focus group of influencers that I had worked with in past campaigns and hired for, clients, and just picked their brain and said, "What do you think of this? Like, is this something that you would do? Would you join? How much would you pay?" And so kind of culling all of that information together as much as possible before
Yeah.
you like hit the green button,
Mhm. Mhm.
because ultimately that's the real test. But
Right.
I feel like there are some things you can do to set yourself up for success short of just jumping head first. But that was my process. I don't know, I only know what I know. So
Well, no, I think that's smart because you're doing your research. You
yeah.
did your research first before you kind of made that decision, and I think that's something like definitely for me. I'm more of I have an idea, go. Kind of learn, right? And there's certain moments where I find myself where I was like, oh, you know what? I probably should have like taken a breath and realized, okay, what is the actual lay of the land here?
Yeah.
And done my research. And I think that's an important point to bring up because market research or just doing your research isn't a sexy topic. because everyone's more about, I want to start the business, I want to make the money, I want to have XYZ. But
Mhm.
every successful campaign that I've ever launched has always been grounded in research. And I think
Yeah,
it's a topic that not too many people are fond of talking about because it isn't sexy yet. When you really think about it, it's like the best thing ever you could do.
it is. It definitely is. And I think that's a great topic. I feel like we could talk about that alone for an
Mhm.
hour.
Absolutely.
But I joke, and how I kind of started my marketing career was avoiding like the calculus class and,
Yeah.
and math. But in all honesty, 10 of 13 years of my career was working in Excel
Yeah.
and looking at numbers and trajectories and outcomes and statistics and,
Like, don't don't
looking.
don't get me started. I can talk about formulas all day.
Yeah.
So.
Like, it's really nothing. People think like marketing, Mad Men, martinis in the conference
Yeah,
room, like what's the
yeah,
big idea here? But
yeah.
sometimes the big idea is what the numbers tell you.
Mhm,
um Working for Burger King down in Miami, their global headquarters, they're private equity.
mhm.
So that was a real intense
Crash
lesson on
course,
what
yeah.
it is, yeah, to look at the bottom line and make decisions based off of profitability, but also how to tell a story when you're marketing. Working for Burger King in Miami for a couple of years, and they're owned by private equity.
Mhm,
So a lot of that experience was diving into Excel spreadsheets and looking at data about how do we tell a brand story, but that's rooted in numbers and in profitability. You want to be creative. You want to have the creativity to tell the story, but you also need a foundation of where it came from, how you're ultimately going to make the decision, and honestly, sometimes the numbers can tell you when to start and when to stop. So,
absolutely.
I think if you do your due diligence, um, rooted in Excel or numbers, or even just qualitative,
Mhm.
asking questions of, is there really a market need? Can go so far before you're out of money and out of time, which is
Absolutely.
every, like, I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
mean,
business
the
story.
the statistic that keeps going around is that, in the first year alone, 90% of businesses shut down,
Yeah.
and the biggest reason for it is cash flow. But when you look at cash flow, it's more like money management. And the reason why, it's because a lot of, at least from my personal experience working with, businesses that start from nothing and want to build brands, is that they want to be like the Coca-Colas of the world, the Amazons of the world. And it's, you can't compete at that level yet. You have to build slow, slow and low kind of for a while before you kind of get to that point. And a lot of them don't end up doing the research for their market, their product, their customer base, and taking both that qualitative and quantitative feedback to figure out, oh, you know what, here's the problem, and then let me provide the exact solution my market needs for that. you know
Hmm.
so it
I,
sounds like Burger King did the world some good there.
it definitely did me some good.
That's good. That's
I will tell you, for 6 months, I worked in their test kitchen with our food scientists,
mhm.
and
It's
in
pretty
the
impressive, by
consumer
the way.
insights.
Yeah.
It was impressive until 10 pounds later. I was like, okay, I'm out. Like, get me out of here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I grew up in Miami, just in Kendall, so
Oh, yeah. See
we
now.
did a corporate tour of Burger King,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow, I can't imagine working here because I'd be like 800 pounds right now.
Yeah. Tough. It was tough. Not going to lie. The top
Yeah,
floor, they have a Burger King
yeah,
like for lunch every day or whatever. But
yeah, yeah. And secret hint for anyone that doesn't know, they always have some really cool stuff that's never on the menu at
that's
the regular
true.
stuff. So, anyways, just insider secrets.
Yep.
But something you said earlier when we were talking about Create Collabs, where you were kind of talking about the intersection between like influencers, social media, and kind of advertising for small medium businesses. And so for me, it kind of sounds like right place, right message, right time in terms of
Mhm.
combining all three together. So
Love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
when
You're
you
hired.
so well, I mean, it's Dan Kennedy, who I'm not sure if you know who that
Yeah.
is at the moment, but that's
Uh-huh.
kind of one of the sayings. And I
Yeah.
studied under him for a while. And so you know did the research that you did ultimately lead you into that direction in terms of like the influence of social media and the advertising? Or was it also just based on just your own personal feeling of what you wanted to do?
Um, I think my experience led me there
Mm,
because, as I said, we were running these influencer campaigns and still are for clients, not on the sort of self-service platform, but it came out of a need when Facebook changed their algorithms back in early, I think January 2018,
hmm.
and decided we're going to serve more friends and family and less brand and business messages,
Hmm.
which was a strategic decision on their end. And as a marketer and as a business owner, I understand why they're telling businesses you can no longer serve your message for free on our platforms anymore.
Right.
Um, I get it, but it also was a real shock to a lot of business owners that were highly dependent on their Facebook page that for 10 years prior were all about go like our page.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if you like the page because you're not seeing any of the posts.
Absolutely.
So, right? And
Absolutely.
that hurt a lot. A lot of our campaigns that we were doing, social media management and helping with content calendars all really became kind of a waste. And
Yeah.
I was telling people like, I can help you put this uh, content calendar together, but you're really not getting any value because no one is seeing it.
Yeah.
So we started to pivot a little bit and reallocate those dollars. And by doing that, and at first it was just a solution to get more organic reach. So more of like an advertising solution.
Hmm.
And what I found along the way is, oh my gosh, there is this whole other side to influencer marketing, and that's content.
Hmm.
So a lot of these brands that we were partnering with, they can't afford a professional photographer and hire a model and find the space and create this perfect, sort of brand interaction that
Yeah.
doesn't look fake, but also doesn't look too real. And,
Yeah.
it's just kind of an awkward, um, people are so exhausted of stock images. They don't want to be sold to. It's a
Hmm.
much softer, content marketing metric now. And so this marriage of influencers for this solution became really like a gold mine. We were able to get that organic reach back. We
Hmm.
were able to get content, authentic content with real people and real faces and real locations, without staging it.
Hmm.
And you also get a level of that third party credibility talking about the business. It's not coming out of the logos,
Hmm.
um, profile, if you
Right.
will. So, for me and for the segment that I'm looking at, which is small to medium businesses, micro influencers generating foot traffic and local exposure,
Mm.
it really just became hugely successful. So I forget what you asked me, but that is
I mean, I think
story.
you covered like a broad range of questions that I had anyway, so that was perfect.
Okay,
The one
good.
thing I do want to ask you is metrics. What are your key performance indicators in determining whether you know this
Yeah,
influencing campaign is working? And the reason why I'm asking that too is just because ever since this Fire Festival documentary came out, kind of influencers have gotten a bad rap. So I've seen kind of a shift in the mentality that some business owners are having.
yeah,
I still believe influencer marketing is this pretty important, but I would love to have your take on that. It's,
yeah, totally. Fire Festival
Mhm.
and since, right? People
Yeah,
are just beating the shit out of these influencers, man.
yeah, yeah.
And sometimes rightfully so.
Hmm.
There are plenty out there, especially from a macro perspective when you think about celebrity influencers. I actually just did a presentation 2 weeks ago in Atlanta about this, and one of the slides I present has this hilarious meme picture of Kim Kardashian in her cry face, um, and they're showing actually that the ROI on, let's call it celebrity endorsements or macro influencer campaigns get less engagement than a banner ad that Google is serving.
Wow.
So if you think that you're doing influencer marketing, you're actually not. You're just getting a celebrity endorsement, and you might as well, or you may be better off spending your money elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it has a lot to do with how you go into a campaign, what your actual success metrics are, the outcome, the goal that you're looking for here, because some of it is qualitative,
Hmm.
which is the feel good nature of having someone else say how great your brand is.
Hmm.
But there are some quantitative metrics around it that you can get your arms around. Engagement is a big one,
Yeah.
how people respond to the content. And if you pick the right partner, which is where things can go off the tracks a lot of times, is brands will pick someone. It's a very inauthentic exchange.
Right.
And from an influencer's perspective, it's a money grab because they don't truly believe in the partnership.
Yeah.
And so it comes across fake, and you feel used and you feel dirty when you see the ad, and I don't need
Yeah.
any more hair gummies. Like, I'm
Yeah.
done with that.
Yeah.
So you really have to be thoughtful about how you pick your brand partners, set the goals on the front end of the campaign.
Hmm.
So engagement, as I mentioned, is one of those things, but there are also a lot of other ways, because of thanks to digital marketing,
Hmm.
metrics that you can track, right? So affiliate codes is one, or redemption code, any type of click-throughs, Thankfully, or Linko, and you can add multiple different links to track how many people are actually going to wherever it is you want them to go.
Yeah.
There's things like now natively, and I'm speaking just right now to Instagram,
Hmm.
engagement metrics around, putting polls or asking questions, things that people often don't even think about, but ways you can continue to track how the content is affecting the influencee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? It gets a really bad rap, both from the brand picking people that are not good partners and really not doing their due diligence,
Mhm.
and from the influencers who, because it is like this, I like to say influencer marketing is like Monster, for your resume back in 2000 and like 3. It's just this black hole where, as an influencer, you're like sending your media kit and just like, oh, please,
Please,
someone
please.
hire me,
Right.
And so when you get a brand knocking on your door, you're flattered and you're like, yeah, I need the money, like pay
Let's
me.
go. Yeah.
So it just, there are some nuances, and if you don't understand, and if you just go in thinking, oh, I can just hire this person and
Mhm.
they can talk about our brand, it can go wrong.
So is that where Create Collabs comes in and kind of bridges the gap between finding the right, I believe you said micro influencer, and
Yes,
then finding the right business to kind of make sure that that relationship is mutual, benefits both, but it also has a real and authentic feel to it.
exactly. Yeah, so we're really trying to solve pain points on both sides.
Hmm.
We pre-screen our influencers and we put them in a content category, so content that they frequently talk about.
Mm.
So if you're a foodie, you only see collaborations that are food related. If you're talk about fashion, you only see collaborations that are fashion related.
Hmm.
Um, and then because we pre-screen everyone from the brand's perspective, you don't have to be or have an intelligent marketer on your team. We've already done the heavy lifting for you. And we're only asking them to provide a product or a service, which is then worth a retail amount. And that's what determines the amount of content they're getting. So content being a post, a story, a video, an image. So there's no haggling, like there's no negotiation of contracts.
Hmm.
It also expedites so that they can just get started right away.
Wow.
And from an influencer's perspective, they don't have to throw their resume in Monster, right? Once you're
Uh-huh.
approved, you're on the platform, you get to directly claim the brands that you want to work with. So you're not panhandling around the site.
Right, right.
You see a brand that you're like, oh, this is interesting. This interests me.
Mm.
I'm not going to work with these people. I'm going to work with these people because I like it. So it's just a level of like authenticity and transparency that I haven't seen anyone be able to execute yet. So although doing it is certainly the ultimate test.
Yep, yep. No, and
So
so I mean, where do I sign up? Where do I go?
yeah, I mean, seriously, what do you mean you're not on
Exactly.
yet?
What's going on, everybody? Uh,
Yeah,
that I mean, I can talk about this like I think all day, but
yeah,
I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I definitely want to make sure that people understand and know where to go. So feel free to share your social media. Where can we find you? Where can we sign up for Create Collab? And how do we get more in contact with you?
awesome, love it. So shameless self plug here. You can go to Create Collabs, plural, createcollabs.com to sign up. You can see information as an influencer or as a brand. You can also follow us on Instagram at Create Collabs. You can follow our empty Twitter account at the moment, also at Create Collabs. Or you can follow me and hear all my fun, interactive Twitter rants at Brittany Ward.
All right, I'm signing up for all of it. Let's go. Let's make it
Okay.
happen.
Love it.
Brittany, thank you so much for your time, for your story. Learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for everyone who listened to today's episode. We'll see you all here next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar.